Flames ripped through the house like a beast unchained. The front door buckled and crashed to the floor, smoke curling out in thick, choking waves. From inside came a scream, shrill, panicked, small. Then came another. "Someone help." A voice cried from the sidewalk. "The kids. There's still kids inside." But no one moved, except for one man. A figure stumbled through the smoke, black jacket wrapped tight around a limp child in his arms. He was coughing, eyes red and wild. The moment his foot hit the grass, he fell to one knee, gasping, but he stood again, and went back in. Seconds passed, then minutes. The sky groaned with the sound of the roof splitting open. Everyone on the street had seen the man before, but few remembered his name. Just the janitor, the old one. But who was this man really? Why did he vanish before the cameras came? And why did the fire seem to awaken a pain he'd long buried? Rewind. The sun had barely risen over Fairview Street, where quiet porches and tidy lawns painted the image of peace. Nothing ever really happened here at least nothing worth remembering. At the far edge of town, half hidden behind rusted fencing and a crooked mailbox, sat a weathered trailer. It leaned slightly to one side like it was tired. Inside lived Mr. Elijah Simmons. To the children at Carter Elementary, he was the man with the mop and the warm smile. He swept the hallways with soft footsteps, patched broken chairs in silence, and wiped every muddy footprint without complaint. He always wore the same brown boots, the same blue work shirt with Elijah stitched neatly on the front. But to most of the parents and staff, he was invisible, or worse, disposable. You'd think the district could hire someone younger. Mr. Darnell, a sharp-suited PTA father, once muttered to another parent, "Old guy moves like molasses. Don't want my kids near him when something actually goes wrong." Elijah heard it. He heard most things, but he never responded, just gave a small nod and moved on with his broom. To those who bothered to look closer, there was something odd about him, how his eyes would linger on the fire. Alarm drills, how he watched over the kids during those moments with a kind of tension, like his mind was somewhere else, somewhere far worse. He had no family in town, no social life, no past, as far as anyone knew. He arrived in Fairview 5 years ago, bought the trailer in cash, and took the janitor job the next day. No one asked questions, and that was just fine with Elijah. Until the fire. It was a sweltering Tuesday afternoon when it happened. School was out. The streets buzzed with cicadas and heat. Elijah was walking home, his shirt damp with sweat, when he smelled it. Smoke. He paused, turning his head toward the tight row of homes near Mason Street. Then he heard its screams, sharp and desperate. A child's cry. He dropped his lunchbox. He ran. The fire had started on the first floor. Curtains had caught, likely from a candle or faulty outlet. Flames were already clawing up the staircase by the time he kicked the door open. Heat slammed into him like a truck. "Elijah, don't." Someone shouted from behind. A neighbor. They called 911. The fire truck's on the way. But he didn't stop. He didn't think. His body just moved. He dropped low to the floor, crawling through smoke and blistering air. Upstairs, he found the boy under a bed, barely breathing, eyes fluttering. Elijah wrapped him in his jacket, cradled his head like glass, and carried him out. The neighbors gasped when he emerged. His face was slick with sweat and ash. But then he turned back. "Elijah, the house is going to cave." Someone cried. He didn't answer, just looked up at the second floor, then went back inside. The screams stopped. Only smoke remained. Then, minutes later, the front door exploded open again. He stumbled through the haze, cradling a second child against his chest. A little girl, covered in soot. Her hand gripped his shirt like a lifeline. He collapsed on the lawn. The fire consumed the rest, but the kids were safe. He was taken away by ambulance, but by morning he was gone. Discharged himself. No press, no interviews, no thank you parade, just silence. And the town began to wonder, who was Mr. Elijah Simmons? And why did this fire feel personal? The grass on Mason Street was still scorched a week later. The The charred remains of the house sat like a skeleton, cordoned off by yellow tape. News vans had come and gone. Reporters had asked questions. Neighbors had given interviews, and the fire department had called the rescue miraculous. But Elijah Simmons, he'd vanished. Not from town, his trailer was still there, but from the public. No one saw him at the grocery store, the post office, not even outside for his usual evening walk. With that old tin can he used to pick up litter. He just walked out the hospital. A teacher at Carter Elementary whispered in the lounge. Didn't even wait to get discharged. Didn't want attention, the school secretary said, adjusting her glasses. Didn't even give them an emergency contact. Mr. Darnell, the same man who once tried to have Elijah fired, stood outside the burned house days later with his wife and kids. The boy, his son, was the one Elijah carried out first. His daughter had been found cowering in the downstairs closet. Her hands burned, her tiny voice gone hoarse from smoke. Darnell hadn't spoken to Elijah since, not even to say thank you. The guilt was thick, but pride was thicker. I didn't know, he told the fire chief quietly. I didn't know he had that in him. Nobody did, because Elijah never told them. At night, Elijah sat alone in his trailer, the fan spinning weakly overhead. His hands trembled slightly when he opened the drawer next to his bed. Inside was a photo. A girl, maybe 6 years old, missing her front teeth, her arms wrapped around a dog, both smiling. His daughter, gone now. Her name was Grace. She died in a fire 14 years ago. He'd been a firefighter back then, in a different town, a different life. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon. He had just come off shift when the call came in. Structure fire. Residential child possibly inside. He raced to the scene with his crew. The house was engulfed in flames. When he got there, the dispatcher gave him the address. It was his own house. He never forgot the feeling, like something inside him cracked open and never closed again. They pulled Grace's body out 30 minutes too late. He never forgave the fire department, or himself. He resigned that same month, turned in his badge, and disappeared. Moved to a town where no one knew his name. Became just a man with a broom and a quiet smile. But the sound of fire alarms still made his hands clench. And every time a child cried during a drill, his throat tightened. He had promised himself, if the day ever came again, he wouldn't wait. He wouldn't be late. At Carter Elementary, something strange started happening. The kids began asking about Mr. Elenot as the janitor, but as the man who saved the kids. Drawings of him appeared on classroom walls. Crayon renderings of a tall figure in a blue work shirt, carrying children through flames. Parents who once ignored him started stopping by the school office. Some left notes. Others brought baked goods, hoping someone would pass them on. But Elijah never returned to work. The principal said he needed time to recover. In truth, Elijah wasn't sure he wanted to come back. Not after everything. Not after feeling that fire against his skin again. Not after waking up in the hospital, choking on the same kind of smoke that once stole his child. But then, one evening, just after sunset, a knock came at his door. It was a little girl, with a bandaged hand. Behind her stood Mr. Darnell, eyes swollen, no words on his tongue. The girl stepped forward. "Thank you," she whispered, voice raspy. Elijah's throat closed. He knelt, gently touching her hand. She smiled. "Are you a superhero?" He chuckled softly. "No, sweetheart. Just someone who was there when it mattered." Darnell stepped forward, voice cracking. "I was wrong about you. About everything." Elijah nodded. "I know." That night, Elijah placed a photo of Grace on the windowsill. For the first time in years, he left the drawer open. The flames hadn't taken her memory. They'd only hidden it under silence. But now people finally knew. Not the full truth yet, but enough to start asking the right questions. What made a man walk through fire for children who weren't his own? And why did the house seem so familiar to him? The questions started with whispers. At first, it was just the teachers. Then the neighbors. Then the firemen who'd arrived too late. Finding the house already empty, children saved. Hero vanished. Did you know he used to be a firefighter? No way. I heard he left the job after a tragedy. Some say the house he saved was the same house where his daughter, but no one knew for sure. Until Officer Ramirez stopped by the school to drop off a safety report. She'd served in a different city years ago, Brooklyn Heights. A place with a story. Elijah Simmons, she said quietly, holding a wrinkled paper in her hand. I remember him. That day, in the Carter Elementary staff room, silence fell. He was one of the best, calm under pressure. Heart like steel, soul like fire, she said, voice lowering. But he lost his daughter in a house fire. The trucks were delayed. Bad traffic. That call shattered him. He quit and vanished. Everyone looked at one another. The pieces clicked. The grief in his eyes. The way he flinched at sirens. His obsession with checking the fire exits. The way he always made sure kids didn't mess with the alarms. He wasn't just being careful. He was haunted. Back at his trailer, Elijah sat at the edge of his bed, hands clasped tightly together. He didn't sleep much anymore. Not since the fire. He'd gone back there once, days later, after the crowd cleared. Stood outside the smoldering house and just stared. Same layout, same creaky steps, same red mailbox, same oak tree in the front yard where Grace used to tie her jump rope, same room where she died. That's where he found the boy, hiding under the bed, and downstairs, the closet, the very same place where he'd once told Grace to hide during pretend games. That's where the little girl had crawled into. It wasn't just a coincidence. It felt like a reckoning, like the fire had come back to ask, what would you do this time? And this time, he had an answer. The next morning, a brown envelope appeared on the principal's desk. Inside was a note. Thank you for the years. I'm proud of the floors I swept, the kids I watched over, and the messes I cleaned up that no one else noticed. But I'm not just a janitor anymore. It's time I faced the past. Elijah. Attached was a photo of him and Grace. The principal wept reading it. So did the secretary. And the next day, something unusual happened at Carter Elementary. All the students were asked to write a letter to someone they were grateful for. One by one, they pinned them on a large display board near the front entrance. More than 70 of them were addressed to one man. Elijah the brave. Elijah the hero. Elijah who didn't let the fire win. Meanwhile, Elijah took the old bus out of town. Not to leave for good, but to visit the grave he hadn't seen in over a decade. Grace's. He knelt by her headstone with trembling hands. The sun was setting behind the trees, turning the sky the same golden shade he used to see in her crayon drawings. I did it, baby, he whispered. I wasn't too late this time. He pulled from his bag a small box. Inside was her jump rope, the one he'd kept all these years. He placed it beside the grave, gently brushing away the leaves. And for the first time since the fire that stole her, Elijah cried. Not the silent kind, not the bottled kind, the kind that breaks the dam inside. Back in Fairview, the town that once ignored the janitor began changing. Mr. Darnell publicly apologized at a PTA meeting, donated money to rebuild the burned home. The mayor declared the following Friday Elijah Simmons Day. But Elijah didn't show up to the ceremony. He was already gone again, not hiding, just moving forward, where? No one knew, but someone later spotted him outside another school in another town, fixing a flickering exit light, wearing the same blue shirt, same quiet smile, maybe still running from pain, maybe walking toward peace. But one question still lingered in Fairview. Was it fate that brought him to that house? Or something deeper? Was the fire a test, or a second chance sent by Grace herself? The town buzzed with Elijah's story for weeks after he left. But soon, like all small towns do, the buzz quieted. The school year rolled on. The walls were repainted. The fire-damaged house was cleared. Still, something lingered in the air. Not smoke, memory. Especially for two children. Liam and Ava Darnell, the siblings he saved, were not the same anymore. Ava no longer played near windows. Liam had nightmares about the sound of cracking ceilings. Their parents tried therapy, new toys, extra attention. But the one person they asked for repeatedly, Elijah? Can we see him? Where did he go? Mr. Darnell searched, called hospitals, fire departments, even posted on local forums. No luck. Until one envelope arrived in the school mailbox with no return address. Just a short message typed in a neat font. Let them heal. They're stronger than they know. And remember, the fire didn't win. E.S. Attached was a Polaroid of two small hands holding a jump rope. Meanwhile, Elijah walked with heavy steps through the city of his past. Brooklyn Heights. The place he vowed never to return. The old firehouse was still there. Brick red, American flag waving, numbers slightly rusted above the doors. He stood across the street in silence for nearly an hour. A young firefighter came out to sweep the steps, glanced across the road, paused, walked over. You okay, sir? Elijah nodded, eyes distant. Used to work here, he said softly. The young man looked at him. Then the patch on Elijah's old jacket. You're Simmons? Elijah blinked. You know me. The firefighter gave a slow nod. My captain told me about you. Said you saved more people than anyone on the force during your years. Said the fire that took your daughter, he never stopped blaming himself for that delay. Elijah looked away, jaw tight. He retired last year. Left a note on his locker. It said, I hope Elijah forgives me one day. The two men stood there in the quiet hum of city sounds. No sirens today. No chaos. Just a moment. Then Elijah extended his hand. They shook. That night, Elijah walked to a small, tree-shaded park a few blocks from the old station. It hadn't changed much. He sat on a bench and pulled a small notebook from his bag, leather-bound, old, frayed at the edges. Inside were letters, unsent ones, to Grace. Page after page of things he never said out loud. About how sorry he was, how lost he felt, how he never stopped seeing her in every frightened child, how he couldn't forgive himself for not being there just 2 minutes earlier. He flipped to a blank page and began to write. Grace. I walked through the fire again. This time, I got there in time. There were 2 kids, and they were so much like you. One hid under the bed, like you used to. The other in the downstairs closet, just like our hiding spot during hide-and-seek. I didn't freeze this time. I didn't scream your name and wait for someone else. I ran in. I found them. I carried them out. I heard your laugh in the wind afterward, and for the first time, I smiled. He closed the notebook, pressed it to his chest, looked up at the stars. Back in Fairview, something strange happened at the rebuilt house on Mason Street. A fire inspector walked through the new frame, nodding at safety reinforcements and flame-resistant walls. But in the corner of the children's room, right where Ava used to hide, he found a small note taped to the new wall beam, written in messy handwriting. Crayon. Thank you, Mr. Elijah. I had a dream last night. A girl hugged me in the fire. She had no shoes, and she smiled. She said, tell my daddy I'm okay now. The inspector showed the note to the family. The parents broke down. It wasn't Ava's handwriting. No one had been in the house. Some say kids imagine things. Some say spirits linger near places that changed everything. But others, they believe Grace never left. Maybe she was there that day, in the fire, guiding Elijah's hands, whispering courage in the smoke. Maybe it was more than memory. Maybe it was Grace, giving him permission to finally move on. But where was Elijah now? And would he ever come back to the place that now called him hero? 2 years later, the old school janitor closet at Carter Elementary was turned into a small student reading nook. Above the door hung a new wooden sign. Elijah's Corner, for those who never give up. Inside were 2 armchairs, a shelf of books, and a single framed photo on the wall, Elijah Simmons, kneeling beside a student tying her shoelace, both laughing. He never posed for it. A teacher had snapped it on a whim. No one had known then that it would become the image kids pointed to and said, that's him. The man who saved the Darnell kids. The man who disappeared before the news arrived. The man who never needed a medal. Mr. Darnell spoke at the dedication. His voice cracked in front of the crowd. I used to think heroes wore badges or uniforms, that they stood tall and demanded respect. But Elijah taught me something else. That real heroes are often the ones we ignore. The ones cleaning up after us. The ones watching over our children when we're too busy or proud to see. He paused, hands trembling on the podium. My kids are alive because of Elijah. That's not something you repay. That's something you honor, forever. The students clapped. Parents cried. Even the principal, tough and stoic, wiped her eyes. Somewhere, miles away, Elijah stood in a small, quiet town in front of a community center. He now worked there part-time, helping young kids with after-school projects. Fixed broken chairs, swept floors. Sometimes read books to second graders who couldn't sit still. He was still just the janitor, but this time, people saw him. They asked him about fire safety. Listened when he spoke. He never talked about Fairview. Never mentioned grace to strangers. But one day, a little boy asked, "Mr. Elijah, were you ever scared of anything?" Elijah paused, thoughtful. "Yes," he said. "I was afraid of never getting a second chance." Back in Fairview, a bench was installed in the park where the Darnell children played. Simple wood, steel arms. On it, a plaque, in memory of Grace Simmons, for the child who was lost and the lives she helped save. No one needed to explain who she was. The children knew. The town knew. And the Darnell kids. They sat on that bench every summer afternoon, passing out water bottles to firefighters, who stopped by the playground during their patrols. Sometimes, Ava would look up at the sky and whisper, "Hi, Grace." One final envelope arrived at Carter Elementary just before the new school year. Inside was a hand-drawn map. Just a few simple lines, a road, a small building, and a red dot near the trees. No signature, but the writing was familiar. The red dot. A tiny house with a swing set out front. A girl in a crayon dress stood beside a man with silver hair and kind eyes. They were holding hands. On the back of the map were just 3 words. "We're okay now." The fire hadn't won. It had taken much time, joy, even life. But in the end, it gave something back. It gave Elijah a chance to forgive himself, to save what he couldn't before, and to show a whole town that sometimes the quietest man carries the loudest legacy. Because heroes don't always roar. Sometimes they sweep floors until the day they hear a scream and don't hesitate. Some heroes wear uniforms. Others carry mops and keys, and still run into fire when no one else will. If Elijah's story moved you, take a moment to hit that like button. It really helps us share more powerful stories like this one. What did you feel when you heard Elijah's truth? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one. And if you believe that ordinary people can do extraordinary things, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because more real, raw, and inspiring stories are coming your way every week. Until next time, stay kind, stay human, stay brave.